My in-laws thought I was an illegal immigrant, not knowing I owned their apartment complex. My wife's family never understood my job. In their eyes, I was just a dirty Mexican accountant who secretly ran an illegal substance ring. What they didn't realize is that the amazing apartment they'd found for $100 a month was owned by me. You see, I knew my wife would feel extremely guilty if she knew how much money I was saving for our future family, so I simply kept it a secret. I thought being in close proximity would help us bond and finally be a family together. But instead, things got worse. The harassment started small. Her mother accidentally threw out my work papers, claiming she thought they were trash. Probably forged anyway, she muttered when I fished them from the garbage. Her father would leave ICE deportation statistics on the kitchen counter, circled in red marker. Sarah tried defending me, but they'd pat her hand sympathetically, like she was a victim of Stockholm Syndrome. I wasn't even Mexican, I was Honduran, and in my country, you never speak back to your in-laws. But the more I didn't retaliate, the worse it got. They'd switch to speaking about me in hushed tones, assuming I couldn't understand complex English. Poor Sarah, pregnant with the baby of an idiosyncratic. Her mother sighed over coffee. These people know exactly what they're doing. Get a white girl pregnant, then claim they can't be deported. At dinner, whenever illegal immigrants came on the news, they'd turn the volume up all the way while staring directly at me. When I reached for seconds, her father would say, "In America, we work for our food. We don't just take and take." My jaw ached from clenching it. Just give them more time, I told myself over and over. But then came the night of the Super Bowl. I brought over homemade chicken Alfredo and a huge charcuterie board, their favorite. But when we walked in, they didn't even thank me. Instead, her mom shoved her hands right into my coat pocket and took out my wallet. "You never know when someone might need to identify him," she said to Sarah, while photographing my driver's license and work ID. I saw tears welling up in Sarah's eyes, and I subtly rubbed the small of her back. Our sign for, "It's okay, I love you." For a while after that, everything was good. Me and Sarah's dad were cheering and booing the same sports teams. Meanwhile, her mom looked like she was having an organism from how good my chicken Alfredo tasted. It wasn't until I went to the bathroom that things really took a turn, because on the way back, her father cornered me, breath stinking of whiskey. "I know your type," he slurred, using my daughter for a green card. "But I'm watching you, Juan. My name is Miguel." He knew that. By that point, I knew if I didn't leave, then I'd do something I'd regret. So I started packing up all my poop, and Sarah was already zipping up her coat. That's when her father stood up, face red with triumph. "We've had enough. We know you're illegal. The way you sneak around, never talking about family back home. You're probably running from something." Her mother nodded eagerly. "We've compiled evidence. Sarah deserves better than some criminal immigrant." Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. I went to open it, thinking it was a family friend, but instead, it was 3 men in all blue, with the word ICE written across their bulletproof vests. My heart dropped. Her parents rushed to greet them, pointing at me excitedly. "He's right there, the illegal. We have evidence." I stood slowly, pulling out my wallet. "Officers, I'm Miguel Fernandez. I own this building." I showed them my ID and the deed I kept in my wallet for emergencies. "These are my tenants. They're 3 months behind on rent, which I've forgiven because they're family." Sarah's mother's face went white. Her father stammered. The ICE officers shook their heads in disgust. "Don't waste our time again," one said before leaving. Her parents tried to laugh it off. "Oh, what a misunderstanding. We were just being protective." Her mother stammered nervously. "You can understand, right? We didn't know." Sarah just stared at me with her Disney princess eyes, filled with love and endearment. But one thing was for sure, neither of us were laughing. And the next morning, I served them a 30-day notice to vacate. Family or not, some things can't be laughed off. They moved out in 2 weeks, suddenly very eager to respect the Mexican they'd tried to destroy. Now they rent a cramped apartment across town, probably checking their locks and counting their silverware, terrified of the immigrants they imagine everywhere. But little did I know, her parents' racism knew no bounds, and it wasn't long until they turned Sarah against me. The first sign something was wrong came through Sarah's phone buzzing at 3 a.m. She grabbed it quickly, angling the screen away from me. Her fingers moved across the keyboard rapidly before she set it back down. When I asked who texted so late, she mumbled something about work emails and rolled over. 2 days later, I found her hunched over our laptop in the kitchen, multiple browser tabs open. She slammed it shut when I walked in, but not before I caught glimpses of article headlines about financial abuse and controlling spouses. My stomach twisted. Those weren't random searches. Her mother started scheduling all of Sarah's prenatal appointments during my important work meetings. The first time seemed coincidental. The second felt deliberate. By the third, when Sarah apologized but said she had to go alone, I knew her parents were orchestrating this. I arrived at the clinic after rushing through my presentation, hoping to surprise Sarah. Instead, I found her parents in the waiting room, holding her hands. They looked up at me with barely concealed satisfaction. The nurse called out, asking if the father had arrived yet, and Sarah's mother answered that he was too busy working, even as I stood right there. Things escalated when her father mentioned seeing me enter a suspicious building downtown. He described it perfectly, one of my rental properties I'd been renovating. Sarah's hand moved protectively to her growing belly as she asked me about it later that night. I hesitated, not wanting to reveal the extent of my property holdings yet. My silence only confirmed whatever narrative her parents had had planted. Sarah started pulling away. She'd check her phone constantly during dinner, typing quick responses to a group chat I wasn't part of. When I asked about it, she said her parents just needed space to process everything that had happened. But the way she avoided my eyes told a different story. Her parents invited her to lunch at their cramped new apartment, making sure to emphasize how much they were suffering because of my actions. They'd actually framed the eviction notice I'd served them, hanging it prominently on the wall like some badge of victimhood. Sarah came home with red eyes, barely speaking to me. I woke up one night to find her side of the bed empty. Following the glow of laptop light to the living room, I discovered her researching signs of financial manipulation in marriage. She was taking notes, comparing our relationship to bullet points on abuse websites. My chest tightened as I watched her type, "Husband hides assets," into the search bar. Her parents infiltrated every aspect of our lives. They started attending her book club, telling the other members how worried they were about their daughter. They used specific phrases I recognized from the abuse pamphlets Sarah had been reading. Soon, her friends were giving me suspicious looks at gatherings. Sarah's best friend Catherine pulled her aside at a baby shower planning meeting. I overheard her asking if Sarah was really okay, mentioning concerns her parents had shared. Sarah's response was muffled, but Catherine's hug afterward looked like the kind you give someone in crisis. The separate bank account discovery hit me like a physical blow. I'd gone to transfer money for nursery furniture when I noticed an unusual withdrawal. Tracing it led to a new account in Sarah's name only. When confronted, she said it was just in case, for emergencies, but we'd never needed separate finances before. Her parents volunteered at Sarah's workplace charity event, charming her colleagues with their sob story about being evicted by their son-in-law. Within weeks, they were beloved fixtures at the office, while Sarah's co-workers started treating me like a potential threat at company functions. Her mother, accidentally, ran into Sarah's OBGYN at the grocery store. By our next appointment, the doctor was asking pointed questions about our home environment and whether Sarah felt safe. The seed of doubt had been planted in yet another professional relationship. Sarah's childhood mentor, someone she'd looked up to for years, suddenly started expressing concerns about me. Her father had befriended him at the gym, sharing carefully crafted worries about my mysterious income and secretive behavior. The anonymous email arrived on a Tuesday. Sarah's laptop dinged with a message containing property records showing I owned 12 buildings across the city. The sender had done their homework, including tax assessments and purchase dates. Sarah printed everything out, spreading the papers across our dining table like evidence in a criminal case. When I came home that evening, she was crying. The confrontation was inevitable. I admitted to owning the properties, but tried explaining why I'd kept it private, not wanting money to complicate our relationship, planning surprises for our future. But all she heard was deception. Years of trust crumbled as she fixated on the lie rather than the intention. Her parents' timing was perfect. As Sarah sobbed about honesty and transparency, her phone lit up with a text from them. "We're here when you're ready. No judgment. Just love." She grabbed her overnight bag and left for her girlfriend's house. I woke alone to find subtle changes throughout our home. Sarah's pregnancy books had migrated to the guest room. Her grandmother's ring, which she never removed, sat abandoned on the nightstand. The ultrasound photo I kept on my dresser was gone. Her parents orchestrated social encounters with surgical precision. They visited mutual friends going through an ugly divorce, ensuring Sarah heard every detail about hidden assets and financial abuse. The parallels to our situation weren't subtle. Even Sarah's brother, who'd always remained neutral, called expressing concerns after their Thanksgiving visit. Her parents had worked on him too, painting a picture of his sister trapped with a secretive, controlling husband. I tried showing Sarah our bank statements, proving every dollar saved was for our baby's future. But through her parents' lens, even this looked like manipulation, trying to control her with money, making her dependent. Every gesture of love became evidence of abuse in their narrative. They suggested she see a therapist to process her trauma. Of course, they recommended someone who specialized in cultural abuse patterns. I knew what was coming before Sarah even attended the first session. "How long has your husband been hiding assets from you?" was literally the therapist's opening question. Sarah called me afterward, voice shaking, saying maybe we needed space to figure things out. Her parents had found the perfect weapon, a professional who would validate every poisonous seed they'd planted. The foundation was crumbling beneath us. Every day brought new evidence of their campaign. Sarah started documenting my schedule, texting arrival and departure times to her mother for safety. She used code words they'd developed years ago, treating me like a threat in my own home. I watched Sarah's car pull out of the driveway that morning, knowing she was heading to another appointment with the therapist her parents had handpicked. The house felt hollow without her presence, each room echoing with memories of happier times. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the code words she'd texted her mother just minutes before leaving. Blue sky morning, their old signal that everything was proceeding according to plan. Her parents filed a complaint with the property board the following week. They used their intimate knowledge from living in my building, twisting every maintenance delay and every repair into evidence of negligent landlord practices. The complaint arrived on official letterhead, detailing supposed violations with the precision of someone who'd been taking notes for months. My property manager called me, voice strained, explaining that inspectors inspectors would be arriving unannounced over the coming weeks. The local news picked up the story 3 days later. Landlord Evic's elderly in-laws ran across the bottom of the screen, while her parents sat on their worn couch, looking frail and victimized. They'd aged themselves for the cameras, her mother's usually perfect hair now gray at the roots, her father hunched over a cane I'd never seen him use before. The reporter never contacted me for comment. Comments flooded the station's website within hours, many questioning my citizenship status and demanding investigations into how a Mexican owned so much property. Sarah's co-workers began treating her with exaggerated gentleness at the office. They'd stop conversations when she entered rooms, offer her tissues unprompted, and slip pamphlets about women's shelters onto her desk. Human Resources scheduled a mandatory check-in meeting, expressing concern about her home situation. Sarah came home that evening with a folder of resources for women in abusive relationships, placing it prominently on the coffee table where I'd be sure to see it. I discovered the recording device by accident while looking for my car keys. Hidden beneath the couch cushions, the small digital recorder still showed an active red light. Playing it back, I heard our entire argument about money from the previous week, every word captured in crystal clarity. The timestamp showed it had been sent to her parents' email immediately after recording. My hands shook as I realized how many private conversations might have been documented and shared. Her parents hired a lawyer who specialized in protecting women's financial interests during divorce. The retainer agreement arrived at Sarah's workplace, ensuring I wouldn't see it first. But Sarah left it on her dresser, perhaps wanting me to know or simply past caring about secrecy. The lawyer's letterhead proclaimed expertise in uncovering hidden assets and ensuring equitable distribution. Her parents had prepaid for 20 hours of consultation. Sarah approached me one evening with a document her parents' lawyer had drafted, a post-nuptial agreement that would clearly delineate asset ownership and protect her interests. Her hands trembled as she placed it before me, explaining it would give her peace of mind. The document essentially acknowledged my property ownership while ensuring she'd receive substantial compensation if our marriage ended. I stared at the pages, seeing not legal protection, but the death certificate of trust in our relationship. My refusal to sign sent her to the guest room in tears, texting her mother that I'd confirmed their worst suspicions. Her parents enlisted Sarah's cousins to share cautionary tales at a family gathering I wasn't invited to attend. Each cousin had a story about a friend or acquaintance whose husband had seemed perfect until revealing their true nature. The stories grew more elaborate with each telling, featuring hidden debts, secret families, and financial abandonment. Sarah came home from the gathering pale and shaken, looking at me like I might transform into a monster at any moment. My property manager submitted her resignation after 3 weeks of harassment from concerned citizens. Her parents had mobilized their retirement community, encouraging calls and emails about my supposed slumlord practices. The property manager apologized, explaining that her reputation in the industry couldn't withstand the sustained assault. She mentioned that several other property management companies had already been warned about working with me. Planning Sarah's baby shower became a battleground. Her mother suggested making it women only for Sarah's comfort, implying my presence would create tension. The invitation list grew to include her parents' entire social circle, while systematically excluding anyone who might support me. When I offered to help with preparations, her mother responded through Sarah that it would be inappropriate given the circumstances. Sarah began telling our mutual friends she was figuring things out whenever they asked about our relationship. The phrase became her standard response, delivered with a weak smile that invited sympathy without providing details. Friends began choosing sides based on her parents' carefully crafted narrative. Those who'd known us longest tried to remain neutral, but her parents' campaign made neutrality feel like betrayal to Sarah. The GPS tracker appeared on my car's undercarriage during a routine oil change. The mechanic held up the magnetic device, asking if I wanted him to remove it. I recognized the model from Sarah's recent Amazon purchases. When confronted, she claimed it was for emergencies, in case something happened to me. Her phone showed the tracking app, shared with her parents' devices. They could monitor my every movement, building a detailed record of my daily activities. Her parents offered to pay for Sarah's divorce lawyer whenever she was ready. They presented it as a gift of empowerment, ensuring she wouldn't feel trapped by financial constraints. The check sat in her jewelry box for 2 days before she deposited it. Just having options, she explained when I found the receipt. The money created possibilities that hadn't existed before, escape routes that grew more appealing with each passing day. I returned home from a property inspection to find our locks changed. Through the window, I could see Sarah inside with her parents, who were directing a locksmith still packing up his tools. My key turned uselessly in the new lock. Sarah wouldn't meet my eyes through the glass, focusing instead on the papers spread across our dining table. Her father stood behind her like a bodyguard, one hand protectively on her shoulder. The nursery we'd spent months preparing was being systematically dismantled. Her parents supervised as items I'd purchased were boxed up and labeled. The crib I'd assembled with such care stood partially disassembled, my contribution to our child's space being erased piece by piece. Sarah moved through the room like a ghost, occasionally nodding at her mother's suggestions for reorganization. Police arrived arrived within 20 minutes of my attempts to enter my own home. 2 officers reviewed the temporary protective order Sarah had filed, citing financial abuse and controlling behavior. The allegations were precisely worded, clearly drafted by her parents' lawyer. Hidden assets, isolation from family, threats of deportation against her parents, each claim crafted to paint me as a dangerous manipulator. Sarah stood in the doorway, unable to make eye contact as the officers explained I needed to leave immediately. Her parents moved into our guest room that same night, claiming Sarah needed support during this difficult time. Their belongings filled spaces that had been ours, their presence a constant reminder of my exile. Through social media, I watched them transform our home into their territory, posting photos of family dinners where my chair remained conspicuously empty. The hashtag Justice for Sarah appeared across social media platforms within days. Her parents' book club and retirement community networks shared posts about supporting victims of financial abuse. Each share added details to the narrative, creating a viral story of a young woman escaping a controlling immigrant husband. Local advocacy groups picked up the cause, unaware they were instruments in a carefully orchestrated campaign. My tenants began receiving letters questioning the validity of their leases. The return address led to her parents' lawyer, who claimed to be investigating potential fraud in my property holdings. Several tenants called in panic, worried about their housing security. I spent hours reassuring them, providing documentation, but the damage to trust was done. 3 families gave notice within the week, citing concerns about ownership disputes. Sarah's ultrasound photo appeared on her mother's social media with a prayer for the baby to have a better father figure. The post garnered hundreds of sympathetic comments and prayers. Friends who'd celebrated our pregnancy announcement now offered support for Sarah's brave decision to protect her child. Each comment felt like another nail in the coffin of my reputation. My lawyer delivered devastating news about Sarah's legal strategy. She'd filed for emergency custody before birth, citing an unstable environment and financial deception. The filing painted our home as psychologically harmful, with my hidden assets creating an atmosphere of distrust and manipulation. Her parents' affidavits supported every claim, providing detailed accounts of witnessed emotional abuse. The custody hearing took place in a sterile courtroom that smelled of floor polish and fear. Sarah's parents flanked her at the plaintiff's table, her father wearing an American flag pin that caught the light as he whispered to their lawyer about my immigration status. The judge, a stern woman who'd clearly reviewed the extensive filings, listened as Sarah's lawyer painted a picture of systematic deception and control. The temporary orders crushed any hope of normal fatherhood. Supervised visitation only after birth, with visits to occur at a court-approved facility. Her parents had successfully positioned themselves as the stable, trustworthy guardians compared to the secretive immigrant who'd hidden vast wealth. The judge's ruling noted their willingness to provide consistent support versus my pattern of deception. An anonymous complaint arrived at the Latino Community Center, where I'd volunteered for years. The letter detailed concerns about my involvement with vulnerable populations given my ongoing legal troubles. The board, composed of people I'd worked alongside for decades, called an emergency meeting. They expressed regret, but explained that protecting the center's reputation required my temporary suspension from all activities. Sarah changed her life insurance beneficiaries during what should have been a routine prenatal checkup. Her mother's bridge partner, who happened to be an insurance agent, facilitated the changes. Her parents were now primary beneficiaries, with provisions for our unborn child that I would merely oversee. Each document she signed pulled apart another thread of our intertwined lives. I discovered her parents' house hunting in my properties under an LLC name. The property management company I'd hired to replace my previous manager forwarded the application, noting the generous offer above asking rent. The LLC traced back to her father's golf buddy, but the intended occupants were clearly her parents. They were attempting to burrow deeper into my life, claiming pieces of what I'd built while pushing me out. Sarah's brother finally called me directly, his voice heavy with conflict. He admitted her parents had threatened to cut him off from his inheritance if he maintained contact with me. His mother had made it clear that supporting me meant choosing sides against family. He apologized before hanging up. Another ally lost to their campaign of isolation. Her parents hired a private investigator from her father's golf club connections. I noticed the same sedan at multiple properties, always with a telephoto lens visible through the window. The photos would later surface in court documents. Each image of me entering my buildings spun as suspicious activity requiring investigation. Normal property management became evidence of secretive behavior in their narrative. Sarah's prenatal class instructor pulled me aside after a session, explaining that several participants had expressed discomfort with my presence. Her parents had reached out with concerns about the stress I was causing Sarah. She suggested I might want to consider attending a different class, or perhaps supporting Sarah from a distance. Another space that had been ours became hers alone. Her mother's social media post showed a cropped photo from our company holiday party 2 years ago. My glass of champagne became evidence of a drinking problem, the timestamp carefully edited to suggest frequent intoxication. Comments poured in about poor Sarah dealing with an alcoholic husband on top of everything else. Friends who'd been at that party knew the truth, but remained silent, not wanting to get involved. The calls to my family in Honduras started at odd hours. My mother phoned me crying, asking why Sarah's family was calling about my treatment of my pregnant wife. The caller knew details only Sarah could have shared. Pet names, family stories, intimate moments twisted into evidence of manipulation. My family's confusion and hurt added another layer to the isolation her parents were constructing. A GoFundMe page appeared titled, Sarah's Support Fund, Escaping Financial Abuse. Her parents crafted a narrative of a young woman trapped by pregnancy with a controlling husband who'd hidden vast wealth. Donations poured in from their community, each dollar a vote against my character. The fund raised thousands within days, money Sarah didn't need, but which served to publicly cement her victim status. The local newspaper ran a sympathetic profile of her parents titled, Grandparents Fight for Daughter's Freedom. They posed in their cramped apartment, the framed eviction notice visible in the background. The reporter, who never attempted to contact me, painted them as elderly victims, standing up to a powerful landlord to protect their daughter. The article went viral in local Facebook groups, generating hundreds of supportive comments. Sarah went into early labor during an argument about custody arrangements. The stress of the conversation, combined with months of sustained tension, triggered contractions 6 weeks before her due date. Her parents, who'd been recording the conversation from the next room, immediately blamed my hostile behavior. The recording would later surface in court, edited to remove context and emphasize my frustrated tone. Hospital security received a briefing about the volatile ex-husband who might attempt to disrupt delivery. Her parents had arrived first, painting a picture of an unstable man who posed a threat to mother and child. I nearly missed my child's birth, held at the security desk while they verified my identity and relationship to the patient. Only Sarah's weak insistence allowed me into the delivery room. Her parents stationed themselves outside the delivery room like sentries. Through the small window, I could see them updating their phones, crafting the narrative in real time. They'd already created social media accounts for the baby, establishing their version of the story before our child even drew first breath. The birth certificate listed me as the father, but her parents insisted on hyphenating the last name to include Sarah's maiden name. The first photo of our baby excluded me entirely. Sarah cropped me out before sending it to the family group chat I still couldn't access. Her parents' response flooded in immediately, welcoming their grandchild while making no mention of the father. The image spread across social media within hours, establishing the visual narrative of a single mother supported by loving grandparents. Her parents moved in full-time under the pretense of helping with night feedings. My requests for overnight visits were denied based on the supervised visitation order. They controlled access to my child, scheduling their presence to minimize my involvement. The baby's nursery reflected their choices now, my carefully selected items boxed away in the garage. My carefully saved baby fund, accumulated over years of planning for this moment, was frozen during financial discovery. Her parents' lawyer had known exactly where to look, which accounts to target. Money meant for our child's education and future became evidence of hidden assets in their narrative. The court-appointed financial analyst questioned every deposit, every transfer, viewing love through the lens of deception. Sarah admitted during a mediated conversation that she still loved me, but love wasn't enough when trust was broken, she explained, repeating words that sounded rehearsed. Her parents had given her a framework for understanding our relationship that recast every gesture of love as manipulation. The mediator, recommended by her parents' lawyer, nodded sympathetically at her pain. Her parents suggested selling our house to start fresh. They'd already contacted their realtor friend, who provided a market analysis showing we could sell quickly in the current market. The house where we'd planned to raise our family became another asset to divide. Sarah toured apartments near her parents' place, envisioning a future that erased our past. My security footage from the building mysteriously corrupted after a power outage that affected only my unit. The electrician who responded to the emergency call turned out to be her father's nephew. Months of recorded evidence showing her parents' harassment vanished in a convenient technical failure. Backup systems had somehow failed simultaneously, leaving me without proof of their campaign. Her parents joined the neighborhood watch with enthusiasm, spreading concerns about the absent father with hidden assets living nearby. They attended every meeting, building relationships while poisoning opinions. Neighbors who'd known me for years began crossing the street to avoid awkward encounters. The community that had been home became hostile territory. Child services arrived following an anonymous report about my unstable housing situation. The investigator, who mentioned attending college with Sarah's mother, conducted a thorough review of my circumstances. Every property I owned became evidence of instability rather than security. The investigation found no immediate concerns, but remained open, another sword hanging over my head. Sarah posted the first family photo on social media with the caption, "My Village." The image showed her holding our baby, flanked by her parents in what had been our living room. My reflection was visible in the window behind them, a ghost haunting the edges of their new family unit. The post received hundreds of likes and comments, celebrating her strength and their support. My request for increased visitation was denied pending the ongoing financial investigation. The judge noted concerns about the disparity in living situations and the need for stability during the baby's early months. Her parents' presence was cited as a positive factor, providing consistent care, while questions about my assets remained unresolved. Each ruling pushed me further to the margins of my child's life. Her parents registered our baby for daycare near their cramped apartment, not our house. The enrollment forms listed them as emergency contacts while my name appeared nowhere in the paperwork. I discovered this when trying to add myself to the pickup list, only to be told I'd need court documentation proving my right to collect my own child. The following evening, her father held court at the VFW hall, regaling fellow veterans with stories about protecting his family from threats. His eyes locked onto the Latino members as he spoke about enemies who infiltrate communities, who hide their true nature behind false identities. The parallels weren't subtle. Several members shifted uncomfortably, recognizing the coded language for what it was. My mortgage holders received official-looking inquiries about the legitimacy of my property ownership. Her parents had contacted each lender separately, claiming potential fraud in the original applications. The banks launched internal reviews, temporarily freezing my ability to refinance or access equity. Each investigation took weeks to resolve, draining my resources through legal fees. 3 more tenants moved out after her parents' harassment campaign intensified. They'd stationed themselves outside my buildings during peak hours, approaching residents with warnings about their landlord's legal troubles. My rental income dropped by 40% within a month. Properties that had been fully occupied for years suddenly had multiple vacancies. Sarah brought our baby to the first mediation session, dressed in an outfit her parents had selected. A note pinned to the diaper bag read, "Dressed by grandparents who care," in her mother's handwriting. The baby wore a bib proclaiming, "My grandparents love me," a gift from their retirement community friends. Every detail had been orchestrated to emphasize their involvement versus my absence. The mediator reviewed our financial documents while I watched my child reach for me across the table. Sarah's parents had prepared a comprehensive package showing their financial support during her pregnancy, contrasting it with my hidden wealth. The narrative was clear. They'd been there when I'd been secretive. The mediator's expression grew increasingly sympathetic toward their position. I agreed to a settlement giving Sarah 70% of our assets. The alternative meant continued legal battles that would drain everything while keeping me from my child. Her parents' lawyer had structured it brilliantly. I could fight and lose everything, or accept and maintain some relationship with my baby. The choice felt like surrender, but watching my child's face made the decision clear. Her parents immediately filed for grandparents' rights, citing parental instability. They used my own settlement as evidence, arguing that someone who'd admit to hiding assets and agree to such terms must recognize their own unfitness. The filing included affidavits from their entire social circle, each swearing to witnessed concerning behavior. The Latino Business Association, where I'd been a member for 15 years, voted to rescind my membership. The president apologized privately, explaining his wife had become friends with Sarah's mother through their shared grocery store. The community I'd helped build for decades was closing its doors to me, another casualty of her parents' systematic campaign. Sarah sent a final text before blocking my number on her parents' advice. The message was simple, but devastating in its implications for our future. Her parents had convinced her that any direct communication could be used against her in court. Our years of marriage reduced to lawyers as intermediaries. The baptism invitation never arrived. I learned about the ceremony through a mutual friend who assumed I'd be there. Her parents had planned the entire event at their church, inviting their friends to celebrate their grandchild's spiritual beginning. Photos later surfaced on social media showing her father holding our baby at the font, assuming the role that should have been mine. My scheduled pickup arrived to find her parents waiting in the driveway. They wore body cameras, documenting every interaction for potential court use. Her father's hand hovered near the record button as he performed the exchange, narrating the time and condition of transfer like evidence collection. The baby, sensing tension, began crying immediately. Her father dropped the diaper bag, spilling its contents across the driveway. My court-ordered substance test results scattered in the wind, the negative results visible to passing neighbors. He apologized insincerely while making sure everyone saw the papers. The humiliation was calculated, designed to break me down through 1,000 small cuts. Her parents petitioned the court to supervise my visits, citing my erratic behavior during exchanges. They documented every sigh, every frustrated expression, every moment of normal human emotion as evidence of instability. Their lawyer presented a pattern of concerning conduct that existed only in their interpretation. A hurricane swept through the region, damaging several of my properties. Insurance claims stalled after adjusters received notices about ongoing ownership investigations. Her parents' lawyer had sent letters to every company, creating enough doubt to delay payments. Repairs couldn't begin without funds, leading to further tenant losses. Sarah served divorce papers at our baby's first birthday party. My family had gathered to celebrate, unaware of what was coming. The process server arrived during the cake cutting, handing me documents in front of my mother and siblings. Sarah's parents had orchestrated the timing playing for maximum impact, ensuring my humiliation was witnessed by those I loved most. Her parents convinced Sarah to pursue criminal charges for financial fraud during marriage. Their connection to the prosecutor's office through a family friend who owed favors made the impossible possible. The case was thin, but the investigation alone would drag on for months. Another tool to limit my access to my child. Code enforcement began targeting my properties with unusual vigor. Inspectors arrived weekly, finding violations in perfectly maintained buildings. One apologized quietly, explaining he had no choice but to do his job. The fines accumulated faster than I could address the citations, each one meticulously documented in her parents' files. Local news ran an exposé on the housing crisis, featuring unnamed landlords who hid assets while raising rents. The details matched my situation precisely, though my name was never mentioned. Her parents' media connections had found another avenue to destroy my reputation without risking defamation claims. Sarah's lawyer demanded I liquidate all properties for a clean break. The proposal ignored market conditions and tax implications, focusing solely on immediate division. Her parents pushed this narrative, eager to see my life's work dismantled. They wanted me broken financially, as well as emotionally. Her parents made an offer on my original building through a shell company. The price was 30% below market value, justified by the complications surrounding the property. They were attempting to claim the very building where their campaign had begun, a final insult to add to injury. The word that shattered me came during a supervised visit. My baby looked directly at Sarah's father and called him Papa. Her parents had been coaching this moment for months, teaching my child to recognize another man as the paternal figure. My hands shook as I continued playing, pretending the betrayal hadn't just carved out another piece of my soul. A petition circulated through the Latino business district demanding my removal from all community organizations. Her parents had mobilized their networks one final time, turning my own people against me. Signatures came from business owners who'd known me for years, but now saw only the narrative of a dangerous man who'd hidden assets and threatened elderly in-laws. The final custody ruling arrived on a Thursday afternoon, alternating weekends with continued supervision, while her parents received equal time unsupervised. The judge noted their stable presence throughout the child's life versus my pattern of deception. Every lie they'd planted had bloomed into legal reality. I stood outside the building I still owned, watching through the window as her parents played with my child in what had been their apartment. The same space where they'd plotted my destruction now hosted their victory. My child laughed at something her grandfather did, a sound that both warmed and broke my heart.